You folks have heard me get really high on where BC's going this year, that I think that they're going to turn the corner and I think it's going to be a big year. And, I can hear you. I can understand if you started to tune me out. You're like, AJ, you're not the right guy. Well, what if I told you Phil Steele, one of the most respected prognosticators, agrees with me? And I'll tell you what he says in his newest magazine on today's show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. Happy Friday, everyone. This is a live afternoon episode where we're going to talk about Phil Steele. Now, if you guys are college football fans, the name Phil Steele should be someone that you're well aware of. He is a national writer who has written the world's most accurate preview magazine over the last 28 years. He's, I went to Barnes & Noble and bought his magazine, and it is 350 pages. This is going to be light beach reading for me, but I flipped through it. Mitch and I had been talking about it on text, and we're looking at what he had to say about BC, because you're here to talk about Boston College. And I think it's really positive, some of the things that he's saying that BC is going to improve upon. And so let's kick it off with the overall projection of where he has BC. Now, if you look, he has the projections of what teams BC should be favored against. And he has BC favored against 8 different teams this year. That is a big step in the right direction if that's if that's exactly what's going to happen. He then gives his improvement awards. Now, he gives out, I think it was like 15 schools that he sees making a big jump in 2023. I'm going to read you what he says overall about BC. Steve Adazio hit 7 wins in 6 of his 8 years. Jeff Hafley did a great job getting the Eagles to play 11 games and finish 6-5 with a pair of upset wins in 2020. BC had 0 positive COVID tests during the season. BC was negative 28 yards per game in ACC play and had 2.2 net close wins, signs pointing down. In 21, their quarterback was injured week 2, and BC went 2-4 without him. Then when he returned, he was not 100%. BC was 6-6, but did not get to play their bowl. Last year, BC had negative 28 net all conference points returning, losing their entire offense. BC did upset both Louisville and NC State, ending their 25-game losing streak to ranked opponents, but blew an 11-point fourth-quarter lead versus Syracuse and wobbled through a 3-9 season with Djokovic injured again. It was their first 9-loss season since 2015. This year's 15 starters return, and BC is in the going-up box for both yards per play, and they were negative 12 in turnovers. We'll talk about both of those in just a moment. BC had 34 underclassmen in the 2 deep last year, most among ACC. This will be a much more competitive team, and they have the most improved offensive line in the country. Let me say that again. And they have the most improved offensive line in the country. They avoid Clemson and North Carolina in ACC play. BC will be vastly improved on offense and improved on both defense and special teams. They have 15 returning starters and make my coveted most improved list. So, lot there, right? So, this is Phil Steele. This is a guy, if you go to like page number 2, he ranks his expectations versus other magazines. Because like he says he's the most accurate, but he shows it to you too, that he is the most accurate. And this is a guy as well that is saying Boston College is going to be improved. And I know folks are worried, and I get that. I totally get why folks are out there and going, oh man, I've been bit enough by BC. But he's saying that they're going to have the most improved offensive line in the country. Now, that's you could interpret that a bunch of different ways, and I'm sure Phil would do that for you. When you're a historically bad offensive line, a massive jump would be to be mediocre, right? Like if you went from dead bleeping last to 50th, that is a huge jump. And that would make you one of the most improved, because most other schools are like, oh, I went from 60 to 40. That's not a big improvement. But when you went from 125 or whatever the number, 131 to 50, that is a massive jump. And maybe it's not perfect, but it still gets you where you need to be. And so some of the things that he says, I think should get you excited. I know the Boston College reaction from the fan base is to be hesitant, to be critical, or a little bit, you're not going to believe it until you see it. And I get that. But I'm saying right now that I've been crowing for this for months. We've had Mitch on. Mitch says the same thing, and he watches the stuff. Phil Steele is a national reporter. This is a guy that does this day and night, and he's saying the same thing. When he says they'll have a vastly improved offense and improvement on defense and special teams, doesn't that make you see where this team will go? He also puts in, and I've said this before, that BC has one of the easiest schedules in college football. I saw someone else on Twitter, and I posted it on my threads, that has BC with so it's Kelly Ford ratings. They have the easiest schedule amongst Power 5 teams, and they're playing against the worst offenses from any defense that they have to. Let me rephrase that again. They are playing the worst offenses combined of any Power 5 team. So there again, if your worries are the secondary and you're playing bad offenses, that could mask that. If you have an easier schedule, that will get the other pieces going. So when you hear people saying, oh, I'm starting to believe that this is going to be a big change, this is the reason why. You've got Phil Steele putting them on their most improved team list. You have Phil Steele saying that BC can make a bowl game. Now, he doesn't, I think I don't know. I didn't see, and I could look it up later because there is so much in this. I believe he has them at either 7-5 or 8-4, but he has them as a bowl game. They need to, for me, right? This is all great, but it needs to be more than 7 wins or more. You can't go 6-6 with the schedule, because when you look at 2024, BC, between their in-conference games that they have and the fact that they're playing like Mizzou, Michigan State, they've got a tough schedule coming up. They need to build some momentum this year, and they need to have a very successful season. But on the positive side, as I said, this is where you like to see it. You like to see someone at a bigger, not just me, because I know some of you are like, AJ, you just say the same things over and over again, and that's great and all, and you want to be positive. Well, I do want to be positive, but I also, this is the stuff that I believe, right? This is the stuff that I think is happening with this team. But Phil Steele agrees with me. In a moment, I'm going to go to some of the areas that he thinks BC is going to improve upon. He's going to look at specific things that BC will do better this year, and I will give my thoughts on why those things could happen. You want to hear all of that in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our good old friends at FanDuel. I want you to take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to be the first home run in a game. If you think that Raffy Devers is going to hit the first home run, go over there. You'll get your odds. If you win, you're going to get paid instantly. That's the best part about FanDuel. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official betting partner of Major League Baseball. Locked On BC, AJ Black, and we're talking Phil Steele's his preview of the upcoming season. And I have like bookmarked everywhere on my page, everywhere in my magazine. I just got this, and I already have like pages folded and little sticky notes. And he has, you can go through this magazine. They have the top of individual units, which I don't believe BC's on for anything, which I get. But he also has listed in here some of his most improvement in certain areas. And one that I wanted to bring up was BC was listed for most improvement in rushing yards. Now, they were listed number 2 behind Mississippi State. And I think Mississippi State is probably ahead of them because, unfortunately, with the passing of Mike Leach, I'm not sure. I don't follow SEC football like that school enough. But I imagine they may move away a little bit more from the air raid and run the ball a little bit more. That just seems like a natural thing there. So BC is number 2 in the country in terms of their most improvement in terms of yards per game and in rushing yards. Again, there is nowhere to go but up here. There's nothing you could do, I think, that makes this any worse, right? This is going to be a big piece of why BC could be an improved team. And I think that's what Steele is getting at different points in his previews. Last year, BC could not control the clock at all because they couldn't run the ball. Jeff Hafley, and last year it was McNulty. This year it'll be, Shimko and Chazinski. Their goal is to, control the clock. Any good offense that's balanced, they want to make sure their defense doesn't have to do a ton. They didn't get to do that last year. BC's running backs were so ineffective, they were basically wiped out of every game. Like, there was no need to, you had them in there. I think back to that Notre Dame game, and I felt like they threw screen passes every other pass or little flicks to the side. Other than that, they couldn't run the ball. And that takes out a huge chunk of your game and screws everything up. You can't run, you can't pass the ball, you can't do play action because no one believes you're going to run the ball. You're keeping your defense on the field way too long, and it messes things up. Now, you look at what happened last year, and I saw a statistic, I think it was Stats of War, that put up it was a statistic that, and I saw Mitch retweet it, that it was amount of yards per run before contact. And BC was dead last by a lot. And that to me shows how tough it was for those running backs. Yeah. So he has them, where is it? Sorry, I just lost it. It was the wrong one. He has them. Oh, never mind. They're last. And they had, here we go. They were 1.36 yards per carry before they were hit. Dead last by 5.05 yards to Oklahoma State, and then Kentucky, South Carolina, Northwestern are right above them. Even Colorado had more than that. That means BC running backs were hit faster than any other running back in the country. If your offensive line improves, you're going to see this get better. You're going to see them be able to do things. And that is going to make this a more well-rounded team. This is going to let Pat Garwo do something. You're going to actually be able to see what Alex Broome can do, because we saw glimpses last year of what Alex Broome is capable of. But for the most part, he was completely shut down because you can only do so many things with an offense that limited. So I think that is what makes this the second ranked improvement in terms of offense. Again, in terms of running games. Again, I go back to they were historically bad. I think they were dead last. They were I think Mitch put it out there, one of the worst running attacks in the last 5 years that were not an air raid team. They've got to go in the right direction. Now, when you have Christian Mahogany back there now, and you brought in Kyle Hergel, and I think I mentioned on the other episode, if you have not followed her, I think her name's like Hannah Frankel. She is the nutritionist for the football team. She put up what I feed my players every day. And it was a expose of like during the day, what Kyle Hergel eats. And he eats 6,000 calories in a day. I mean, he ends his day with 2 wraps. My stomach was hurting watching him eat this stuff, but he's a big dude. And again, you're replacing a revolving door at guard with a guy that has played a bunch, that has experience. That is a huge improvement. That's why I expect the run game to get better this year, to actually be functional, and that'll improve every aspect of this team, from the defense to the running game to the passing game. You'll see things start to click more because the piece that was completely missing is now they're going to be able to integrate that all back into their team. I think that's something that we're going to need to watch for this year. Now, in terms of other improvements, I think like when you're looking at this, they have BC down for a few things. The biggest one that I want to get into is in just a moment, which is the defense, and a piece that Phil Steele thinks that's going to change. We'll get into that in just a moment. Before I do that, I want to thank every one of you that have made Locked On BC your first listen every morning. If you're an everyday or two, give yourself a pat on the back. We are the only daily Boston College podcast out there. We do this 5 days a week during the season, from August to May. You get me 5 days a week, 20 minutes, perfectly paced program. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you like it, hit the subscribe button. If you're new to this, thank you for checking us out. In a moment, I'm going to go to the other side of the ball. And there was a statistic that Phil Steele brings up that I think really brings into view something that could be another big factor that we haven't even looked at for why BC might be in for a bigger season. We'll get all into that in just a moment. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. And we're talking Phil Steele again. And I've enjoyed his magazine. If you're going to the beach, going to the Cape, go ahead and grab it. It is worth it. He's got so many things in here. And he's really worth it to check that out. And some of the other magazines out there are great too. If you check out the Athlon or Lindy's, I wrote the BC previews on both, so you can check those out. I don't do any of the prognostications and stuff, but like, what's the offense look like? What's the defense? All those are me. If you read them, I did the previews for both of those. So the one piece that I thought that was really interesting that came up as well was the defense. Now, we don't talk as much about defense in terms of where BC could improve. But one piece I thought that was really important last year that was missing was turnovers. When you're looking at a team's ability to turn the ball over, BC was near the bottom in a lot of the turnover categories. I think they had, where is it? They had 7 fumbles gained. They had a couple interceptions. Where is it? Sorry, I lost my place here. So they had, but they were near the bottom in terms of plus or minus. And that's what's going to make you a losing team. They were minus 11 in the turnover ratio. That means basically they were down a turnover every single game. Now, Phil has his going up, which means you're expecting improvement, and going down. And he has BC as one of his going up teams. And this is they're saying that teams with a negative double-digit turnover ratio had the same or stronger records 77% of the time since 1991. That means that 77% of the time, you can expect a team to be better in terms of turnover battles the next year. You can also say, I can see a lot of BC fans going, yeah, we're going to be the 23% though. And I get that. But it's going to be interesting to see how BC improves in the turnover battles, because when you're looking at this team, the piece that interests me is the secondary. It's a whole completely different look secondary here, with a lot of guys with a lot of that are really out there to show some things. You lost Josh DeBerry, who was good. And obviously was a big transfer portal loss for you. And you lost Jason Maitre and Jaden Woodbay. You brought in Alex Washington, who is 6'3" at cornerback, bigger than any cornerback they had last year. You brought in Kari Johnson, who's over 6 feet. You brought in Victor Nelson, who's 6'3". You're bringing in bigger dudes. And on top of that, as we've said on this podcast, we think that, Mitch Wolf, who's on every now and then, has said that he thinks that Amari Jackson is going to be out for a breakout year. That he started to show it as a true freshman in that last year. This year, he could be in for a big one. Remember, he had a huge spring game. I think he had 2 or 3 interceptions. This is a guy to watch for. And if you start to get more pressure on the quarterback, if you get Sheeta Salah to stay healthy, you get Donovan Azaraku to play better or improvement, and then some interior push, you're going to see more of those turnovers. And I think that's a piece that we're going to have to wait and see if they can do that. David Hale of ESPN had up his rankings of the defensive lines over the last week. He had BC. He was talking about Donovan Azarako being great, but that BC was one of the worst in the ACC last year in terms of getting pressure when they weren't blitzing. So that's a problem. That's something that BC is going to have to fix. And will they be able to do that this year? I think that's something that's a storyline that I think is worth watching. Can BC get to the quarterback? Can Azaraku take that next step? Because if he's getting there when they're blitzing, that's good. But it also means, like, and one of the other stats he had was that BC let up a lot of explosive plays through the passing game. That happens a lot when you don't get home on the blitz. BC I'm sure would love to get more pressure without having to blitz all the time so that they're not in unenviable situations, with matchup issues. So I think that's something to watch for. Will BC will they improve on that turnover battle? Now, the turnover margin is a two-way street, right? BC's passing game was a turnover machine last year. You had a ton of turnovers, both fumbles and interceptions. You had, 14 interceptions last year, 8 from Djokovic and 6 from Moorhead. You had fumbles. You had, that piece, if that improves, that'll get your turnover margin lower too. So there's a few things there, but I think to wrap this all up, to put a bow on Phil Steele's magazine, he sees BC going up. He sees improvement for the Eagles. I think that's a positive sign. If he's the most accurate prognosticator out there, he's saying these things, maybe there is some reason for optimism. I'm AJ Black. We'll be back again on Monday with another new episode. If there's any new news, we'll break it down. We'll continue to start previewing the season and anything else that comes up. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. You can follow me on Threads too. If you're a Threads person, I'm on there, AJBlack247 there. And you can find my site, Eagle Insider. If you enjoy this, become a subscriber. Mitch he put up a preview of the offensive line that's 4,000 words long. It's the most in-depth on BC you will ever find. We're putting up great content in terms of previews. We're putting content up about recruiting. You can get that for a cup of coffee a month. Come over to Eagle Insider. Sign up today. I hope to see you over there. Thank you all. We'll see you all again soon. Have a great weekend. Stay cool, everyone.